Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a frontline update for the 5th of February 2023. Sorry it's a bit late, had Sunday things to do. However, as a result of having to go somewhere else, I have been able to do less research as I would normally do. So I hope I'm as accurate as possible. Things have been happening. It looks like Russia are either doing counteroffensives or offensives, or are preparing the way for future offensives, but they are active in an offensive posture up and down the front lines at the moment. Before I get to those front lines, it's worth just talking about the daily losses. These are indicative releases from the Ukrainians, of course, usual caveats of accuracy, propaganda. Russians don't really produce the same numbers, etc., etc. 700 liquidated personnel, so fairly average-ish, I guess, for the time at the moment. 2 tanks, 11 APCs, 6 artillery systems, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, 2 drones, and 10 vehicles and fuel tanks. I think that's fairly average as a day. Always good to see, from a Ukrainian point of view, anti-aircraft systems taken out. These are, if Ukraine want to eventually win this thing, which of course they do, they need to get air superiority, and the only way to get air superiority is chipping away at these anti-aircraft warfare systems, the suppression of enemy air defense operations, although that's very difficult because to do that, you kind of need air to do that, and in order to have air to do that, you need to have superiority in the air. So it's just like chicken and egg situation. You got to break that cycle. So this is why you generally do it at the beginning of the war, when people are not quite expecting it, and you hit those air defense systems, take them out, and then you've got air superiority. Now we're in the middle of the war, we've got contested airspace. That's going to be very difficult to achieve. Anyway, what's happened? Kharkiv has been hit by S-300 missiles, plural. I think that's more than one. I mean, some devastating consequences to the use of these on huge buildings. Just what a shame. One of the rockets hit a residential building in the center of the city, and the second hit a building in a higher education institution. So far, it's known about 5 wounded, and there's more pictures of that. S-300s being used against a city. Kharkiv is the second city of Ukraine. It's a big old city. What are you doing, Russia? That is, in my opinion, despicable. Okay, let's get to the northeastern sector of the front line, which is here, Kupiansk to Svatove to Kreminna. And there is news from this area, from the Kupiansk area, from pro-Russian sources saying that basically, let's go to it myself. Sorry, it's in the middle of Bakhmut there. That's not a good place to start. Okay, so we've got Kupiansk here. We have Tavelzhanka, Dvorichna, and places around here, Hrynikivka. So Dvorichna was in the grey zone previously, and part of Tavelzhanka was in the grey zone, according to my map at least, up to yesterday. And now it looks like, well, at least the Russians are claiming they are digging in on the western side of Dvorichna. So there has been this counterattack. ISW has reported this. That the MOD, Russian MOD, have claimed that their forces have conducted successful offensive actions near Dvorichna and pushed Ukrainian forces out to the western outskirts of the settlement. Other Russian sources amplified the claim, although ISW has not observed any visual confirmation of the Russian advance. So I have reflected that here, but I don't know. That might not be 100% true. Those are the Russian claims. So we look at rebar for those Russian claims. In the Tavelzhanka sector, Russian forces broke through the Ukrainian defenses in Dvorichna and dug into the western and northwestern edges of the village. Fighting is still ongoing for the control of the settlement. Russian assault groups are also attacking Ukrainian positions in Horobivka and Hrynikivka from the area of Liman Pershi, I think that is, tying up the 106th Battalion of the AFU 109th Territorial Defence Brigade in this sector. And artillerymen are providing fire support to the advancing forces in Kupiansk, Sinkivka, Petropavlivka, and Holubivka. So let's go and have a look at that. That's all around here. So there is activity. Possibly from Liman Pershi up in this northerly direction, but certainly, yeah, activity all around here, and Russians seem to be on some kind of offensive. Again, is this a serious offensive? Is this trying out the Ukrainians? Are they weaker? Have they given troops elsewhere to shore up defenses in Bakhmut? Are the Russians sensing that the Ukrainians might be spread a little thinly, all up and down this line? I don't know. But that's anyway what Rebar's saying. As we go further down south, well, it says a wide-scale offensive from Kupiansk to Bakhmut stretches thin the air-fused defences and ties up their forces in certain directions. Russian forces are now storming outposts in Kupiansk, Svatove, Liman, and Seversk sectors, also actively advancing in Bakhmut. The number of daily losses, they say, along the entire front is increasing for Ukraine. That would be, while the rate of replenishment has significantly decreased. The simultaneous offensives in the east of Ukraine prevent the Ukrainians, from concentrating on holding one area, increasing the effectiveness of Russian forces. And of course, if Russia can overload with mobilized soldiers, then they might get some advantage here. It's worth looking at what War Monitor says, which is basically, and I talked about this last night with Andrew Perpetua, which there will be territory that's lost to the Russians in the coming weeks. The Russians are going to go on an offensive. It might have already started. We are going to see towns, possibly cities, lost to Russia. Expect that. Manage your expectations if you're pro-Ukrainian. That's going to happen. It's how long they can be held, how much of a cost that will be for the Russians in taking these places. But as War Monitor says, Russian forces launch large counterattacks again west of Kreminna, and heavy fighting continues. The battles in and around Bakhmut are extremely difficult. Ukrainian forces hold positions if they are tenable. Large assaults are being repelled in and around the town. Russian forces attempt to bypass from two directions. The front line in coming days and weeks is likely to change. Appropriate actions are taking place. Suitably vague, but you get the sense that things are happening. Defmon says in the Svatove area, the Ukrainians repulsed attacks in the area of Kivka and Nevska. This most likely translates into Russians are on the offensive and are trying to envelop Makivka. So you got Makivka, just to let you know on my map where that is before I return to Defmon's. So Makivka, if we come down south, we have ongoing stuff happening because of Makivka, but I haven't really heard much about that. We get to Svatova, and then we have Makivka here, which it appeared to have been fairly safely under Ukrainian control, although you do hear about attacks on Makivka on a daily basis, pretty much. You got Ploshchanka over here. I've moved the Russian lines further forward, by the way, from Ploshchanka past Chervona-Popivka and down to the area to the west of Kreminna. Well, it appears the Russian claims are that, as Andrew Perpetua said last night in a talk, that some are claiming Makivka has been taken, some are claiming attacking towards Kharkivka, which means if they're attacking towards there, then the Russians must somehow control Makivka, and that they're attacking this side as well. So there are all sorts of different claims. I haven't changed my map particularly around this area, but expect possibly this to become at least a grey zone if we are to take seriously the Russian claims, which I think obviously we should. Syriac Maps pro-Russian mapper says of this area that the Russians have pushed the Ukrainians further back from Chervona-Popivka to the oblast border. So this is Donetsk Oblast, a little bit of Donetsk coming up there, and Luhansk. On my map, that would look like this. So you've got the border coming up here. Just coming down, they've pushed towards this border. So we did have Chervona-Popivka was kind of under Ukrainian control fairly recently, and they were pushing to Holikova and to Zhitlivka, but now it seems the Russians have done this counter that has pushed the Ukrainians back towards Terny and Nevska and Makivka. The question is how far that will happen. We've got fighting around Dubrova being pushed back there, and Bilorivka. Multiple claims about Bilorivka, very similar to Makivka up there. The Russians hold it. They've take control of it. They're fighting on the outskirts, so on and so forth. It's difficult to know exactly what's going on. ISW says Russian mill bloggers continue to make contradictory claims about Bilorivka, with one mill blogger claiming the Russian forces captured the settlement and are currently clearing it, and another claiming that Russian forces are still fighting to capture Bilorivka. Defmon says, so this is what Defmon had. Sorry, I said I'll return to the map. He's got, pushing towards Makivka, but not having taken Makivka yet, pushing towards Nevska and through to the north of Makivka, possibly through to Kharkivka. But as I said, there are fairly contradictory claims about that. Just to look at what ISW say about these other areas, you repel fighting around all these places: Dubrova, Chervona-Popivka, Kreminna, Kharkivka again. Ukrainian general staff reported that Ukrainian forces repelled Russian attacks near Kreminna itself and Kharkivka. So just to remind you, the confusing thing is here that Kharkivka is behind Makivka. So, what is going on there? It could be that the Russians are here, and that Makivka has fallen to the Russians. We shall see. And coming down, I would certainly assess that Bilorivka, the Russians have moved closer to Bilorivka. I think what we can tell from these conflicting reports is that there are different levels of Russian successes around there. It's which one do you favour? If we come out from Def see if he says anything about. So yeah, so around here. So Kreminna verse, the Ukrainians repulsed attacks around Dubrova, Kreminna, and Verkhonovka Mianka. From what I understand, the intensity of Russian artillery has significantly increased in the Kreminna area. And just to let you know, so here's a map of that representation. Just to let you know, as what Andrew Perpetua was saying last night, and I'd said previously, is that Russians they obviously control the stretch of this road here, and they and all this area around here, and they place a lot of artillery here, and that allows them to actually, hit all around here. Serebryanka, Bilorivka. He was saying Bilorivka is just completely flattened. There's nothing but basements left in that. So and it is, pretty hellish getting in and out, but very dangerous with the artillery fire. So this is a really difficult settlement to try and defend. But of course, it's super important here, and all of these places around here, if you're serious about taking Kreminna. Well, it looks like the Russians might have kind of second guessed the Ukrainians in their attempts to take or encircle Kreminna and have done their attack first. Whether this is their serious counterattack or not is still to be worked out. But they're hitting around here with the idea, of course, Seversk being one of their objectives. Now, as Andrew Perpetua last night on the interview was saying, Seversk is super heavily defended, right? It's a bit of a fortress. But they are moving north from Mykolaievka, and they need to take Rozdilivka and some of these settlements down here. But that is an attempt not to do this larger encirclement for Bakhmut, which they are doing, but not from there. That comes from further down south. Up here, it appears to be about trying to move north to Seversk, and then if they take Bilorivka, that allows them to do that. And as I talked to you before, Dubrova, if you start having a front line that looks something like this, all up and down here, then you have successfully got yourself a buffer zone for Kreminna and Severodonetsk, Rubizhny, and Lysychansk. So this would be surely what the Russians would be looking for. Seversk would be a difficult place to take, but Bilorivka certainly looks in danger. Dubrova could well be in Russian hands again. That seems to swap places quite a lot. And then, these settlements going north to Seversk will have differing levels of defenses. Again, Andrew Perpetua is saying that it's like peeling an onion. There are layers and layers of defenses around here, so it won't be an easy job for the Russians. It might be easy for them to get past these smaller villages of Fedorivka, Mykolaievka, which they've got, Rozdilivka, but as they move further north, it possibly will become more difficult for them. Okay, let's move down towards Bakhmut. Incidentally, what the ISW say about what I was talking about with Seversk there, if the Russians want to properly encircle Seversk and cut off ground lines of communication, that level of advance would require a substantially more concerted Russian offensive effort in the direction of Seversk from the north, east, and south than ISW has hitherto observed. Not enough use of the word hitherto in daily parlance, in my opinion. That is to say that what I was just talking about there is, as I say, it will be difficult. They'll need a concerted effort and a lot of forces to be able to do that. But they are making successes. So there's continued success around Mykolaievka towards Rozdilivka. They have taken a small amount of land just here, just in this sort of river meander, and just a little bit further north of Mykolaievka. Not too much elsewhere along here. Not really sure whether they've advanced particularly west of the road, where there are lots of entrenchments here for the Ukrainians. But as we come further down south past Blahodatny, there's fierce fighting around here. Krasnohora is under a lot of pressure from Russian attacks from the north coming down from Blahodatny, and then obviously east. through into Krasnohora, but then sort of to the south, they've had some success just down there as they are trying to attack Paraskevivka. It could be that Paraskevivka is the weaker element of the Krasnohora Paraskevivka sort of conurbation, if you like. That actually, if they can take Paraskevivka, then Krasnohora will fall. Is one theory, but there is, as you can see here, I show a little bit of territory gained by the Russians, as Syriac map has shown. Syriac maps pro-Russian source, so they've shown gains up there in Chervona Popivka that I was telling you about. But if we come further down south of it, they've moved, according to them, moved closer around Bilarivka that I've already shown you, just to show you that there are the sources saying this. And then we get on to north of Soledar, so the area around Mikhailovka, where I just showed you the meander and a few fields and whatnot, just creeping slowly forwards. And here around Krasnohora, sorry, I'm doing this really, really quickly. Around Krasnohora, you've got the attacks down into the north from Blahadatny, sort of further up here. The Krasnohora is up here, actually. This is more towards Pidorodny, so let me show you where that is exactly, where we're looking at there. So Russians have, so you've got Paraskevivka, Pidorodny, Yahidne, and they are now fighting in the very northern areas of Yahidne and northeast of Yahidne. So they are not only in the northern suburbs, northeastern suburbs, sorry, here, the very northern suburbs now up there, and all along the eastern suburbs here, and the southern suburbs. So there is now suburban fighting in pretty much, I guess that's half of the circumference of Bakhmut. And that is obviously worrying. That's not a good sign, but still these ground lines of communication, or MSRs, main supply routes into Bakhmut, are still just about active, or at least they don't have control over them yet. But I doubt they're being used. I'd say there's fire control over the one going through Ivanivska. The one from Chazzy Yar seems to still be all right. But apparently, what pro-Russian sources say that they are now 1.5 kilometers from this road. Well, let's have a look at that here. So, okay, that's 1.75 kilometers. They are now claiming to be about 1.5 kilometers. Ukrainians are sort of denying that. ISW has not observed visual confirmation of Russian forces being closer than 2.5 kilometers to that highway. So, that would be somewhere back around here. They are inching closer, almost certainly, and it still remains a real worry. The claims about the eastern suburbs. So we go back to Syriac maps. We come down to the eastern suburbs. We have, and the south. This is Opitny with a bit of geolocation. They claim to have taken, the Russians to have taken some more settlements, some more territory in Bakhmut there. So I'll show you on my map. This is advancing north in Bakhmut. So this area and a little bit there. So I can move my Ukrainian lines backwards, but they have advanced in this grey zone area. I had that down as grey zone. Anyway, what does Rebar say? So Rebar says of the Soledar direction going from north to south, Wagner PMC's assaults are attacking the Ukrainians, advancing west from Sako Ivanzeti towards Vasyukivka. Okay, let me put that on the map. So advancing west from right up here, from this tiny village that they've taken, Vanseti, Sako Vanseti, and they're moving west towards Vasyukivka. So that is the claim from Rebar. What else do they say? Clashes continue around Krasnohora, Paraskevivka. Enemies taking significant losses. According to, again, pro-Russian source. Ukrainian drone crews are scouting the areas for Russian movements and providing target acquisition for guns and artillery near Blahadatny. Yep, you'd absolutely imagine that's the case. In Bakhmut, Wagner entered Stupki north of the city. There is intense fighting in the built-up area. Claims that the Ukrainian defenses were broken are not in line with reality. Ukrainian units are continuing to resist. So this is in this northern area. I think just around, well, you've got Yahidny, and you've got this area here, just south of Pidorodny, and there's intense fighting going on there. At the same time, however, the partial withdrawal of units from Bakhmut's northern suburbs and yesterday the departure of the 63rd Mechanized Brigade from the city suggests preparations for a possible surrender. Now, Ukrainians have denied this and they said they are still reinforcing Bakhmut. This could be a psyops or a bit of propaganda, basic propaganda. Ukrainians are currently focusing on holding the road to Chasiv Yar to maintain supply. At the same time, heavy fighting continues in the industrial area in eastern Bakhmut, as well as the residential areas to the south of the city, where assault units are attacking Ukrainian positions in Veliki Troitsky lane and southwest of Bakhmut. Russian units are attacking towards Chasiv Yar Bakhmut highway. Wagner units have advanced towards Ivanivska. They are less than 1,500 meters, so that's a 1.5 kilometer claim. Ukrainian command is sending personnel and armored vehicles to Chasiv Yar from Konstantinivka. Additional defensive lines are being prepared in Konstantinivka. Russian artillery is heavily shelling the Ukrainians there. So all of that is essentially to say that the Russians are pressuring all around Bakhmut. We are seeing the Ukrainian lines shrink, but the question is this a kind of operational withdrawal sense of shrinking that's not really too much of a problem as long as their supply hangs out? And are they just waiting to get back, bleeding the Russians for as much as possible until they hit this river, the Blahodatny, the Bakhmutovka River here, and the Ukrainians then might have the plan. As again, it is dependent upon kind of this supply road coming out there, but it would be a case of keeping to the west of the river and holding on to that. If they can hold on to this area, then they can still maintain a defensive line here and still maintain a presence in Bakhmut. And if they maintain that presence, it means that then the fight doesn't then go to somewhere else and you have to start all over again. You know, you're going to have to fight the Russians somewhere, so you might as well fight them here type thing, as long as you've got supply. This becomes untenable as soon as the Russians are able to cut off the supply completely. So, if the Russians then start getting around to there and start getting around to here, and they have fire control over this, main supply route, they get fire control over that so it can't be used, then the Ukrainians are effectively encircled, and that's where you wouldn't want to rout, right? Like we saw in Popasna, you would want an operation withdrawal. So it's before you get to this point, you decide we're going to withdraw. Is that a point that the Ukrainians have reached, or are they going to continue defending? The news from Zelensky from the top and from others is that they are going to defend Bakhmut. So, yeah. Just to add, Defmon says that he doesn't think that the Russians are advancing that much near Ivanivska. So where Rybar has said they're 1.5 kilometers, he's saying, I don't think they've advanced that much. But you don't need to advance much every day, just a little bit every day, and you'll get there. So if I was Russian, I'd think, well, yeah, that's not a problem. And we're prepared to make these advances at quite large costs. We've made that calculation. It's fine. It doesn't matter if one day we're this much further on, the next day we're that much further on, the next day we're that much further on. Yeah, we're happy to make slow advances, because you know what? When we get there, like, Bakhmut's in trouble. So that might take a week. But at that point, Bakhmut is in trouble. And that's exactly what they'd want. So yeah, it may be slow, but they're happy with that. So as you come further down south to Avdivka, ISW notes that there have not been any real attacks in the last 3 days in this area particularly. They think it might be because there is so much effort being concerted effort being put in elsewhere. I don't know whether that has taken away from forces around here. But yeah, so nothing really to report about Avdivka. Claims about Marinka, there's just, on ISW, there's one claim here that... here we are. So the amplify it's quite a big claim. So here we go. Russian mill bloggers claim that Russian forces conducted an assault near Paraskevivka, and amplified footage showing elements of the 150th Motorized Division of the 8th Guards Combined Arms Army of the Southern Military District clearing a captured Ukrainian fortified position in the western part of Marinka. Now, they put in that footnote 44, they put 2 Telegram channels that both give the same, and I've Google translated this and gone, they give the same bit of writing here, which is actually, I've then gone and found elsewhere this claim. I was looking because the claim is about Mariinsky Bank that they're clearing out. In fact, I'll give it to you. This comes from an RT video that appears to come out yesterday, saying that Russian troops liberate the city. One of the last fortifications of the armed forces of Ukraine, located in the bank building, was cleared. The commander of the motorized rifle company, with the call sign silence in the commander in the salt blue compass, gave the RT crew a tour of the positions where the Ukrainian military had just recently been located. As Compass noted, most of the buildings in the city are built of stone, concrete, and brick, and Mariinsky Bank is one of the most difficult areas to storm along with the Rada, the dairy, and the police station. And then talks about how they, took the bank building, but I don't know where that bank building is. And this is an interesting video by point of fact that it flips between loads of snow. So there's loads of snow. The guys they're talking to here are covered in snow, but then all the footage of actual fighting that's going on is pre-recorded footage, I'm absolutely sure. So you've got all this snow stuff, and then you've got here blowing up stuff with no snow. Snow, and then when they cut back to this kind of footage, no snow, right? And you've got, okay, brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, you're blowing up stuff there. That's not in the last couple of days, right? So there's spliced together footage. I don't know where this bank is. I can't find it. I don't know where the Rud and Derry police station is. I don't know whether that is west or central or whatever. So the claims are that they're clearing the Ukrainians out of the city. They're liberated the city. They're fighting the last sort of strongholds in the west. And yet, I don't know that there's any solid evidence for that. And the last I've heard, other than Rebar that keeps saying they're fighting in the west, is that it's happening in the center. That said, the center is pretty much destroyed. The whole city is destroyed. It's completely a complete apocalyptic nightmare. I don't know, other than, there are conflicting claims. They're all claims from the Russians that are not borne out by any other evidence. So just wait and see whether something comes of that, or whether they are indeed still fighting in the center. So around this area, first thing to say before I get to Vuhledar itself is Novomykhailivka. There have been, I think, Wolgonzo claiming, so a Russian source claiming that actually the Russians have been trying to take Novomykhailivka head on, and that would help them to take Vuhledar, really, because they could be coming at the same sort of level. The Vuhledar's on the heights here. It's very difficult to take it from Pavlivka and Mikhailska. So they're trying these other options. They've been trying Novomykhailivka for some time. Well, apparently, according to Wolgonzo, they've had success north of there, like literally bypassing it and attacking Paraskevivka here. I don't know to what extent, how successful that is. There's nothing much mentioned, I don't think, in the ISW about that. DPA, Defense Politics Asia's got a video on this, but no real details other than the claims of Wolgonzo there. I think it's Wolgonzo. So, but that have a watch out for that. They could be that the Russians have made some gains around here, and that could have knock-on effects for Vuhledar, if that is the case. As far as Vuhledar is concerned, Tatrugami, that seems to know what's going on and have sources on the ground, that says no significant changes for the past 24 hours. The enemy continues to increase the number of artillery and infantry in the area. It seems that the enemy is preparing for slow grinding tactics, which we've previously seen near Bakhmut. I finally got time to share a few images which can shed some light on what's going on near Vuhledar, as I previously indicated in my reports. The heaviest combats happened in the areas of the southern and eastern Dachi, which talked about previously. You can see the number of pockmarks there, representing an awful lot of artillery activity going on. Fresh scorch marks on fresh snow can visually confirm that the enemy continues attempts to establish control over the Dachis area by covering assaulting infantry groups with heavy artillery fire. That will include MLRS, no doubt, multiple launch rocket systems, your Smerches, your Grads. You can also see how the enemy attempted to outflank Vuhledar from the east, but sustained losses and had to retreat to Mikhailska. Overall, the situation remains dangerous due to increasing numbers of enemy infantry and artillery. And again, giving evidence of that, and the huge amounts of artillery that's being thrown there. Someone asked, back to basics, but can they do this successfully with other troops than the death cult Wagner? At least rumours of troops refusing to attack Vuhledar due to excessive losses. They can eventually, if they will keep bringing fresh troops from mobilised who haven't been there yet. The tactics is easily countered if we can destroy their artillery that covers assaulting infantry. We need more means to counter their artillery fire, much more, says Tatragami. I can probably say, so someone then talks about the 155th Brigade, which has sustained super heavy losses. They're supposedly a decent naval infantry brigade, but they've been hurt in Avdivka in November, now being hurt again. Tatragami says, I can probably say that they do not exist as a brigade anymore. Their core has been annihilated several times. Others are severely crippled, no limbs, eyes, etc. The losses are getting replaced with mobilised, so the name 155th is more of a facade right now. And so on and so forth. So really heavy stuff going on in Vuhledar. Not too much news from the last 24 hours, but Andrew Perpetua was saying yesterday in my interview with him that there are a huge number of troops around this area. And sort of what Tatragami was saying is they could do a Bakhmut here, which is just throw troops and troops and troops until they grind the Ukrainians down and get the necessary territory gains. There is talk about there being an extra 30,000 plus troops maybe in Mariupol, 15 to 30,000, some are saying, 3,000 of whom are extra Kadyrovites, these Chechen troops. So there are troop accumulations in Mariupol. If you could safely hit that with HIMARS, you would think, leading to the idea that there are troop accumulations around this area, and this could be like one of the places that Russia seeks to do a counter that might sort of add up to the whole sort of, the Donbass being one of the key objectives. So if you think, okay, let's get this area, Siversk that I was talking about earlier, okay, let's get that there, and then maybe down from Liman. So there could be a Luhansk type attack, although it's just into Luhansk, and you've got Donetsk there as well. So a kind of move along there, and then equally an attack up from Vuhledar, which would seek to do something like that, ideally for the Russians, something like that. Then they have their kind of Donbass, or most of the Donbass that they so desire. Obviously, if you want the whole of the Donbass, technically, you've got to do a bit of that, and that is a really difficult thing for them to do. But if that's one of their goals, then attacking from Vuhledar would make sense. Attacking down from Liman, Kreminna, and Siversk would make sense. So it's all looking like they could be doing an offensive now. It's whether this is really their proper offensive. Like if it's their whole proper offensive, then they don't look like they've got enough troops to do that kind of thing and enough material. It seems a pointless thing to do, to just grind it down, throw troops in on a slow basis, or more troops and more troops. You want a load of troops and punch through, and then be able to get a very quick gain rather than a slow attritional gain. That will not help the Russians out. They will lose too many troops, even with their numbers advantage. Anyway, going on, so ISW, same sort of thing. And then Kherson, there are air defense systems. Ukrainian forces striking a Russian Tor system near Novokakhovka, which was one of the rare ones. I think that's that one I showed you in my video. I think you saw this morning, my extra video from yesterday that I pre-recorded. There is sort of swapping of artillery artillery duels along the Kherson, along the Dnipro, river. Not much news about Crimea. I don't know about HIMARS hits behind the line. I haven't done enough research at the moment, so apologies there. But hopefully that gives you a sense of what's going on, which is the long and short of it is the Russians are putting pressure from Kupiansk right down to Vuhledar. All along this line, we are seeing, apart from Avdivka, that's maybe the only area where they're kind of stepping off. Don't really, Marinka, there are conflicting claims, but other than that, up and down that line, the Russians are putting a lot of pressure on. What Ukraine do with that, how they deal with that, we shall see. It's what we should expect, and if you're pro-Ukrainian, Ukrainians will lose some towns and cities and territory. Right, that's going to happen. The Russians aren't so incompetent that they can't do any kind of offensive and make any kind of gains. We would expect them to make gains if they're doing a major spring offensive. It's just whether that's started, and are they going to do it in this attritional manner or in a more of a punchy manner. I'm sure they've got a lot more to bring to the table in terms of their mobilized troops that they have, and I'm sure they'll be gathering as much material as they can. Anyway, thank you so much for your viewing here. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for helping the channel to grow. Please continue to do so. Any help you can give me is gratefully received. Details in the description below. Take care. I might not be able to do an extra this afternoon, but I might. We shall see. Anyway, until next time, goodbye.